Today I'm joined by Alastair Moss, who's chairman of the Planning and Transportation Committee in the City of London, and in his professional life, he's a property lawyer. So Alastair, what's your response to Grant Shapps' announcement recently about greater focus on active travel? And will this help to accelerate the city's innovative transport strategy, which I think is potentially one of the most advanced of its kind in any major city in terms of enhancing the experience of walking and cycling?
Well, thank you, Peter, for that comment and praise of our strategy. We're very proud of our transport strategy, and you're quite right that the current crisis is really kind of bringing this into sharp focus as to how we can deliver that at pace, at more pace than we envisaged in the first place. And the main reason for that is, of course, the need to socially distance and bring back people into the city, feeling confident they can do so at appropriate distances from each other. You know, we've got to be able to have the return of 500,000 workers into the city in a confined space. And we're determined at pace to deliver the changes that are needed, many of which are in the transport strategy, which we heralded very, very soon.
So what sort of things are you doing to make the city ready for the return to work? And is there advice that you need to give building owners as how they have to behave in these rather uncertain times?
Well, building owners are getting advice from the government as to how we should be occupying internal space. And our obligation is to see how we manage and make safe all of the public space in the city. And working with TfL, we're really actively pursuing every avenue that we can to make that reality. Principally, it's going to be about all public space accounting for itself so that it's being used to the maximum by the maximum number of people being able to move around safely. And that will have a huge onus on active travel, those walking and those cycling. We will be looking to prioritise those transport modes because they're simply the ones that are being used by more people. We anticipate, of course, that most people come into the city via public transport as and when that becomes safe in a phased way, working shift patterns, working different hours and staggering their journeys. But their last mile or less than a mile or over a mile will be via walking or cycling. So to give you an idea as to what the streets will look like, more of the streets will be dedicated to pedestrians and cycling than they are at the moment.
Pedestrian cyclists only, or with a priority for pedestrians?
It will be a combination because, of course, what we do has to be put in place quickly. It has to be done in an experimental way. So we will try and see how things work. And it needs to be simple as well. So some streets will become pedestrian and cycle only. Others will be no-through routes. Others will be a combination. Others we will dedicate certain lanes to pedestrians and or cycles, which at the moment are part of the carriageway. So it will be a combination of measures according to, but what I would say is that it will involve a large number of the major streets and some of the lesser streets in the city. This will be comprehensive.
And this will reflect the longer term plan. So as an experimental and temporary installations, it'll give you a lot of information and data as to how you carry your project forward into the future, won't it?
Yes, it will. I mean, it's fair to say that under the transport strategy, we were looking at pedestrian priority in places within the Eastern Cluster and looking to deliver those within the next few months anyway, pre the pandemic. But this is putting this onto a larger scale, and really no part of the city will be untouched from it. But yeah, the transport strategy is all about active travel. It's about being far smarter how deliveries are made, minimising the amount of private car use, making access for all where required, making the city less of a through route for people, but a destination, and basically moderating all the goods coming in and out, all the people coming in and out, being a bit smarter about how we use our space. And of course, all the effects that this has on air quality and road safety, which we know is part of the sustainable recovery. The city's got to be sustainable for the future. It's got to be a place where people want to work. The pandemic is a short-term, hopefully a short-term issue about a confidence and safety issue, a private and public health safety issue. But the great thing about the strategy is that it should deliver on the longer term on all the air quality and on all the road safety measures that we're determined to bring about as well, and make it a more pleasant environment for people to be in.
But the city has always had a very high percentage of people utilising active travel, which is walking, cycling, but also public transport. Public transport is going to be difficult over the next few months. How do you stop the city becoming clogged with cars as people find alternative ways of travelling relatively long distances?
Well, part of this will be in our messaging that we do not want, and the mayor and the government are giving consistent advice on this, that within city centres like the City of London, it's not appropriate to be using private vehicles. We have less than a few thousand parking spaces within the city. It is physically not possible for people, even car sharing, to get into the city by private vehicle. We will have to use public methods of transportation. There's a big issue, of course, for TfL and Network Rail, etc., to use how safely we can use major rail termini, the tubes and the buses. But that will come. Our role as the City of London is to deal with the built environment that we have. It is with that active travel. In a way, we've got the, dare I say, the easier bit to deal with at the end. But we've got to get that right, because without that being right, we can't then allow the other transportation modes to work coming to the city. I think something like 70% or so of the city's workforce comes in over 10 kilometres away. So the majority of people are commuting and using either national rail or tube networks. So that's got to be right, and we'll work with TfL to make that right. Our experience and our work has got to be from the tube or the station itself onwards to that, what I'm calling the final mile part, where we really hope we will make this a safe experience for all. I think what people are doing now is they're imagining their return to work. We're being realistic about when that might be, but people are planning that in their minds as to how they will do it. Really, what I'm really keen to do is to ensure that people are not thinking as they imagine that when they get onto the city streets, they will be clustered around roads, finding it difficult to cross roads, finding they have to walk on a carriageway, that they're too close to other people, that cycling is not safe, etc. We've got to deal with all those messages now to ensure that people feel assured that they can do that and start imagining that process now. And hopefully all of the network rail and tube and bus networks and things can be aligned to be part of that narrative.
But I suppose that people in the city generally work pretty smartly, don't they? So actually working from home, in a greater percentage of people working from home is not going to be an issue for most occupiers in the city, one wouldn't have thought.
Well, I think the majority of the city has continued actually working and functioning very, very well. When I look back, say 10 years ago or so, even less, I don't think we would have shown this kind of resilience to use technology and the ability to work from home as we are. Of course, I think the majority of people have managed to work in a mobile sense for some time, of course. But we have been based, geographically centering around offices. And this has been a change for people's working patterns. But as I say, the majority of businesses, certainly that we're in contact with and we've kept in close contact with and been supporting through this, have to a degree been business as usual, which is great, and it shows the resilience of the city. I do think going forward, if this is where you're going to, I think that the use of space there will be important, because a lot of this resilience has been built upon the fact we have interacted physically with each other. A lot of society is about using technology smartly and using remote working, but equally our human interactions are very important. And I would say the resilience of the city and resilience of business generally has been due to those human interactions and relationships that have been built up over time that now allow us to work like this in a seamless way. I don't think this heralds the end of us needing to interact as, in the physical sense as human beings in business.
So what do you think in, let's say, the medium term and the longer term, what the impact of COVID-19 is going to be on the way we work and the future demand for office space in the city, because clearly right now you have to provide lots of space for social distancing, but that may well lead to people wanting to have more space in their offices generally.
Yeah, I think, well, there's all kinds of debates, aren't there, going on about, whether, hot desking, I've read in the government guidance, that will not be acceptable. So in the short term, I think the same amount of space, if not more space, will be required for people to be able to, and fewer people to be able to work safely. Of course, who knows how long social distancing and all that will be required to kind of happen. But I think the important thing to look at is what this shows. This will show positive things to people as to how they can work. It is a positive thing for people to have demonstrated to them and for us to be working collaboratively, both at distance and proximity. But I think looking at the city going forward in terms of less car, less traffic, less noise, less pollution, less danger, more experiential kind of things are things that people will look at and think, I want this to remain. I want this to be, like it is. And I think the positive effect of the pandemic will be that people will look to that as a kind of sea change in attitude. We know that most people are concerned about air quality and road safety, but this would have kind of brought this to a head. And the emergency measures that we will bring in conjunction with TfL and will, I think, kind of showcase that and lead to medium and long-term effects, which, as you say, will all be positive effects, which will be reasons to increase London's competitiveness when compared to other environments. At the end of the day, we all want to be in environments which are pleasant, given the choice, quite obviously, and therefore the city needs to make sure it is as pleasant an environment as possible. I think in terms of the longer term effects from the pandemic itself, clearly this is something that businesses will probably plan for. But as I've said many times, most businesses did not have a global pandemic on their risk register. So what effects this has directly on how businesses are run we'll just have to see.
So how busy is your agenda on the planning committee at the moment? Have things stopped, or is it still business progressing?
Well, I was determined, and I think officers of the City Corporation were determined that nothing was going to stop at all, and it didn't. The only thing we were unable to do, and it's still difficult, is to get into some premises to check what kind of neighbourly issues are. We've changed our community engagement strategy slightly so that we have less stringent obligations in terms of consultation, but it's very, very minor stuff. The reality is that most people are reporting that planning is more accessible than it ever was, that we are open for business. We are now moving to, as you know, full public planning committees. We've got full agendas on those. We will be dealing with applications for tower blocks in the city. There is a really, really good pipeline of work coming through. And we as members and officers have been determined to be sending that message and also to be doing the work and being accessible. So yeah, on a personal level, I've never been busier in terms of the development side and the transportation side. I think transportation side particularly because of the fact that we never envisaged that we would be compressing all of this thought on our transport strategy into a few weeks or months when we were looking at really a few years strategy.
Yes, certainly COVID-19 does seem to have accelerated quite a lot of aspects of change. But so if more people are going to be working from home and there's a sort of change in people's attitude to the local, the idea of what is local and places they might support in terms of local communities, might this relax perhaps the city's historic antipathy to residential development?
Well, I think that there's kind of two elements to that. First, the city has never been opposed to housing. We have some major estates, and we are keen on housing, but all in the right location. So I kind of push back on that presumption. We're also in our new plan keen to have housing where we need to. We have different types of housing in areas of the city that are again suitable, that don't sterilise land which lose our competitive edge to be a place primarily of business. So I think, you know, kind of those are kind of two things to bear in mind going forward. As I was alluding to earlier, I don't think this is going to be the end or some demise to the need for office space at all. I don't think, you know, there is always a need, as we've seen through the cycles of how the city's operating through recession and other crises, that generally speaking, where there are voids, they're filled by other business, which is, you know, kind of market forces at play. You know, we just need to make sure that we have the right space available for the right occupiers. And I think these applications which we're doing at the moment, the amount of work being done to deliver on new buildings, which are all around us in the city, will all be adaptable to change to whatever that requirement is for the use of space. So I don't think we're going to be looking at lots of blank, empty space, which the only logical conclusion is it can be used for housing. Albeit, though, as I say, housing is an important part in the right locations.
But generally, the attitude in the city now is where buildings can be reused and repurposed rather than demolition and reconstruction. You would prefer that?
Absolutely, yeah. I think we are. You know, if a new building is proposed, then it needs to be justifying itself as to why the existing building cannot be repurposed and reused. And that is it's a high bar, but it's one that we're determined on environmental. You know, we've got to have sustainable growth. And also, it's not acceptable to build buildings which will have a 20, 30, 40-year lifespan. I firmly believe it would be unacceptable on all kinds of grounds to be dropping buildings, you know, planning on that kind of life cycle of a building. So, you know, I really hope that what we're putting up now will be there for a very, very long time. And I think developers, you know, kind of need to bear that in mind as they do that. You know, I also think the ability now to put buildings up which are so sustainable allows the demolition of existing buildings, and for that, but it's that whole life cycle which we're looking at, and I know is a debate at every committee we have where there's a proposal for a new building in place of an existing building.
And then finally, just talking about rather an exceptional proposal, what is happening now to the inquiry into the Tulip? Can this go ahead in this particular time, or will that be delayed?
I'm told that that's been delayed now to November. So obviously we'll be playing our part in that. Clearly the mayor and we are working together all the time on things, and that was a decision where we were at odds. My view is that the Tulip, if built, would give a very positive signal for London. The reason why the committee approved it is because we want diversity in the city, because we want to increase the tourist offer, because we want to basically, increase the mix of what's going on there, all with the right controls in place. That building, will be an iconic building for London. I think even pre-COVID, it would have sent the right signal to the world that we are open. Now, during this COVID phase and getting out of that into the economic recovery, it will send that signal even more. So my personal view is I rather hope that it will be approved. We'll see.
Thank you very much. Well, as we try and encourage people coming back to London after this is all over, as you say, I'm sure the Tulip will be a very important symbol in terms of showing that London is still open for business. So, Alastair Moss, thank you very much indeed.